Welcome in to this Tuesday edition, Blue Sky Live here with you today. Chase Parham, Neal, McCready, Clark Ford Studio. We will kick off kind of a opponent preview summer content thing. The South Carolina Gamecocks will host the Ole Miss Rebels. I think the sixth game of the season for Ole Miss, if I have that correct in my head. So we're going to talk South Carolina. Today we're going to do that with our good friend Chris Clark, GamecockCentral.com is where he is located. He's going to join us in about 5 minutes or so. So we'll kick off the show with that. The Boston Celtics completed an NBA championship last night, routing the Dallas Mavericks at TD Garden to win the series in 5 games. The NHL Game 7 tonight. Ole Miss released that list of players yesterday that had one omission that was notable and obvious there on that list as well. So all that's going on and more. They picked up a big commitment yesterday. Coverage of that at rebelgrove.com with Mr. Maddox headed to Oxford for his college career. So all those things going on here with you today. Podcast brought to you every day by Blue Sky in Oxford and all over the state of Mississippi. You know, you get lunch specials, you get side items, pulled pork, ribs, all those things with Sweet Daddy locations throughout Mississippi. So no matter where you are inside the state, there is a Sweet Daddy's nearby. And again, coming to you from the Clark Ford Studio.
We are Clark Ford's in Amory, Mississippi, 662-257-1900. Call that number. Ask for Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for. He'll send you a quote within 15 minutes in business hours. It's right to the bottom line. No hassle, no haggle. You get your quote. The rest is completely up to you. You can shop that quote around, or you can do what I've done, what I recommend that you do, and that's hop into a Clark Ford today. Corey and the people at Clark Ford, they want to be your car guy. They want to be your truck guy, and they'll prove to you what that means when you make the call. 662-257-1900. Chris Clark, all other guests join on the Campbell Clinic hotline. The Campbell Clinic is in Oxford now, 2608 South Lamar Boulevard, Suite 102. Just across the street from the cottages at Hooper Hollow. The Campbell Clinic provides full-service orthopedic care. Everything from sports medicine to foot and ankle surgery to spine and total joint care, pediatric orthopedics, physical therapy, and more. To book an appointment, go to campbellclinicoxford.com or call 901-759-3111. Walk-ins always welcome at the Campbell Clinic, Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. until 4 p.m.
We going straight? What are we doing? Yeah. Okay. Give us 1 second. We'll get going. Chris, how are you?
Doing well, guys. Good to hear from you. Good to see you. I like the new digs, by the way. I haven't seen this, I don't think, yet.
It's been a little while, last year and a half. I don't know.
It all kind of runs together at this point. I don't know. You just keep doing it and doing it. Do news. It is what it is. It's all good. But I appreciate that.
I told Chase I actually would have enjoyed the joke you were planning to tell when you came on. I probably would have gotten a kick out of it.
I think we'll wait. I don't know. We'll wait a couple years on that one. I think, if you know what I mean, and then we'll.
I understand.
We'll address that at a later date.
I get it.
I'm going to talk a good bit of football here, or we are with you today, Chris. But I'm just kind of curious. What's been the reception of Paul Mainieri in Columbia? That was not on my radar, Chris. Didn't have that one pegged.
Yeah, I know, Chase, I was kind of leaning on you, as connected as you are in the college baseball world, to kind of, run some candidates and some different things by you and during the process. And yeah, the Paul Mainieri thing was not on the bingo card. My colleague Les Mitchell at Gamecock Central has, I think he said, I can't remember how many guys he said, he's like, if you would have had 100 guesses of who the next coach would be, you probably wouldn't have come up with Paul Mainieri. I mean, there were reasons that deterred suspicion, specifically him being out of the game really for a couple years. But I think what ended up happening there, man, was just as Ray Tanner went through the process, he certainly talked to some coaches that were, some names that have been pretty hot in the college baseball world, not just this cycle but other cycles, and some guys that have really good resumes. Keeping Monty Lee on staff, former College of Charleston coach, former Clemson head coach, and the interim head coach after Mark Kingston was let go, was, I think, a priority. And quite frankly, I think South Carolina somewhat liked the idea of Monty Lee as the next head coach. That would have been probably a tough move to make from a perception standpoint. But as Ray Tanner explained it, he spoke to Paul Mainieri about some candidates. and it ended up just kind of, hey, what about you type of thing. It almost kind of sounded like, y'all remember when the guy met with John Calipari and he got Calipari in the hotel room and was talking to him about the Arkansas job, and it became a why not you type of thing. And I think Maneri, with his experience level, with his resume, and then being able to put together a staff that included Monty Lee and some others, became quite appealing. And Maneri wanted back in, and they made it happen. So the reception's been good. I think people are concerned about Maneri's age, with him being, I think he'll turn 67 this year, and that's understandable. But it's been some excitement so far.
Football wise, obviously Ole Miss is doing this thing where I've said that I think the fans are excited and very anxious at the same time, because when 9-3 becomes a disappointment, it's a little bit of a different world. And it's not something that is normal for Ole Miss in its past. Frankly, South Carolina kind of right there in similar history standpoint of what that would mean. Where does South Carolina kind of have that Ole Miss game checked just from a fan base standpoint? I mean, you look at it and it's right there kind of in the middle of the season. You're probably going to have a top 5 team coming in, kind of that kind of thing. What's sort of the general expectations? And when you start laying out the year and they see the schedule, what's sort of the feedback about that Ole Miss game in the middle of it?
Well, honestly, this might sound funny, but the first piece of the Ole Miss game, when people kind of realized or remembered that game was and has been on the schedule, was, Juice Wells is going to be coming back to Columbia, right? So that was the first biggest thing that people latched onto. But look, I think this is a schedule that, as it usually is one of the most difficult in the country. I've kind of been surprised at some of the metrics. I think ESPN FPI had it like, I don't know, in the 15 to 20 range in terms of difficulty. There have been some other metrics that were maybe more of just the eyeball test that had it, number 1, top 5, whatever. And I think it's certainly a very difficult schedule. And so Ole Miss is kind of viewed by the fan base as one of the most difficult games. I mean, the silver lining, if you want to, go that direction, is that this is a home game, right? But I mean, look at the October slate for South Carolina. They start the first Saturday of October by hosting, I agree, Chase, what's probably going to be a top 5 Ole Miss team, a team that has playoff expectations. And then after that, you get a reprieve by going on the road in back-to-back weeks to Alabama and Oklahoma in back-to-back weeks. And so those are your 3 games in Oklahoma in the month of October, rather. So incredibly difficult slate. And they got other home games, right? But it's A&M in the first month of November. You get Missouri, which is another team that's kind of, hey, maybe it's I don't even know if it's a dark horse type of playoff team. You host them. I
think they're a legitimate playoff team. I think people are underselling Missouri. Their schedule's very favorable. Yeah. They return a quarterback. Mm-hmm. Everybody does the Drinkwitz is a goob thing. Who cares? He's a really good coach. I mean, he wins. Yeah. Everywhere he goes, their team's really well coached, and they're going to be pretty good up front on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I don't know why we can't list – I'm not talking about you, Chris, just in general people. Yeah. I don't know why we can't lump Missouri in the same category with Ole Miss and Texas and teams that – I mean, Missouri went to a BCS game last year and won it too. I mean, I don't know why we're doing this with Missouri. We'll do it with Ole Miss, but we won't do it with Missouri. It's kind of mind-boggling to me. I really haven't figured that part out. But I'm not the football expert that a lot of people out there are, and so I'm like, well, maybe they know something. But people go, well, they won a lot of close games. Well, I mean, kind of Ole Miss did too. I mean, we're not playing. It feels weird.
I think almost every team that wins a championship wins some close games. Heck, sometimes they even lose a game here or there during the course of a year. But yeah, I mean, they return so much. And I guess maybe, Neal, the only thing I can think of is Missouri's not like this name brand. Like if you just slapped another logo and name on the school and they had the same personnel, or maybe they had sometimes it's about the coach, right? Like Ole Miss is really, really good, but they also have Lane Kiffin. He's more of kind of a media darling type, I would say, my perspective, than Eli Drinkwitz, who is kind of a goober, like you said. But they've done really well in the NIL era. He's a really good coach, and they've recruited extremely well. And I totally agree. I mean, that's going to be a really good team. So you start stacking it up, right, for South Carolina. Any road game in the SEC is going to be tough, for the most part. But, you have LSU. Like, when you're looking at this schedule and you're like, the LSU game is pretty darn winnable, that just sounds weird, right? Like, if that's one of your most winnable games is LSU at home for a noon game, that's a strange kind of thing. You got to go to Clemson, you got to go to Bama and Oklahoma, you host Ole Miss, you host Missouri, go on the road to Kentucky. I mean, it's a really, really tough schedule as usual.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, I didn't realize just how bad it was till you started talking. I pulled this thing up, and you get the opener against Old Dominion. Okay, whatever. After that, other than a game against Akron, that could be a pretty decent football team, above average, and they can have 6 losses by November 2nd without without even doing anything wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a better football team than last year. You may say, well, you idiot, of course they are. They went 5-7 last year, but again, it was a tough slate last year as well. And I think there's a lot of positions that you could look at on this team that were upgraded from last year. I think the question is just how much did they upgrade? And then what does that mean when you're playing the schedule? Like, you can look at it and say, yeah, South Carolina got better at this spot, this spot, this spot. And you feel better about this being a deeper, more talented team than last season when you count what they did in the portal, what's coming back, etc. But then, you got to remember a lot of other teams in the SEC got better too. Like Missouri got better with what they did in the portal, what they did in high school recruiting, what they've got coming back. Ole Miss got better, I think, even from last year. There are not many teams on this schedule that you could look at and say they're probably going to take a step back. Like everybody's looking at Alabama saying, well, they don't have Saban, they don't have this, they don't have that. They'll probably take a step back. They do have a coach that has lost, like, how many games has DeBoer even lost in college? 20, during his whole career.
Not many, and he just got through playing for the national title in January.
Just
it's
at
a
different
of the narratives
school.
that are out there that I just sort of scratch my head at. Like, Alabama's going to suddenly just suck. I'm like, why? Based on what?
Why do we think that? Yeah. So it's I mean, a lot of the other programs that South Carolina is going to play this year are going to be better. Like, we could say, well, LSU lost Jaden Daniels and some other guys. They'll probably take a step back, but they were horrific on defense. Like, what if they're better on defense this year? So I do think South Carolina will certainly be a better team. There's actually not much doubt in my mind that from a team standpoint, this will be a better team than last season on the whole. They'll have some areas that are not quite as good. They'll have more, I think, that are better. But what does that mean in terms of wins and losses? Ultimately, it's a wins and losses business. And so does that mean 5 wins again? Does that mean you step forward to 8? I don't know. I do think their margin for error is going to be quite small, which is really the case for a lot of teams in the conference.
So I thought Spencer Rattler was pretty good last year. Tell me about how – I mean, this isn't an apples to apples comparison because it's not fair, because the South Carolina team last year did not like just crater the way that I'm going to compare it to a team in a minute. But Ole Miss years ago had Jeremiah Masoli, who played really well and sort of covered up just disasters all over the field. And they ended up being more competitive than I think they would have been had they just had an average quarterback on the field. I'm not saying it was that way for Carolina last year, but there were times that I thought Rattler sort of carried them and kept them in games that he didn't get enough credit for because they didn't win. What will they look at? Yeah. What will they look like at quarterback this time?
Yeah, I mean, to start with Rattler, I think it says all you need to know that he raised his NFL stock after a season in which South Carolina wasn't very good on offense and went 5-7. So what does that tell you? I mean, he and I know Jim Nagy from the Reese Senior Bowl talked about it, on several broadcasts during the year. Like, he got better. He didn't turn the ball over as much, so he got better there. He started showing his legs more, whether it's extending plays or being able to run for first downs. He really had one consistent target. I mean, after the Juice Wells saga played out earlier in the year, he had Xavier Legette had a breakout year, and he was phenomenal. But that was really the only receiver, right? You think back to the offensive line woes that they had. They had, anywhere from 5 to like 10 offensive linemen injured last year. First game of the year against North Carolina, South Carolina gave up 9 sacks, right, against North Carolina. So they didn't have a good offensive line. They didn't have much depth to speak of at receiver. The running game was not very good. The defense struggled a lot, particularly in the month of October. And so despite all those things, like you said, Neal, Rattler turned it around. And there have been a lot of positive reports out of New Orleans, with what he's doing with the Saints. So many people, it always bugs us in Columbia that, there's still some people that were hung up on the 17-year-old, Netflix thing. And that was not Rattler at all. He was a consummate pro in Columbia, just kind of poster child for NIL and, second chances, and the way he played, the way he led, it was tremendous. So here's the interesting thing. It's hard to lose a Spencer Rattler because of how good he was, how experienced he was, and talented. South Carolina has a guy in Lenoris Sellers, and I'm going to try to not be too hyperbolic here. Lenoris Sellers has not been a starter. He played in a few games last year in spot duty. This guy has first-round NFL draft talent, and you may roll your eyes or whatever. Maybe some of the listeners will, but he really does. I mean, he has every physical and even mental trait that you could want in a quarterback. He's big. He can run. He's elusive. He's extremely smart. He's extremely, just confident and cool. Like, he's one of those guys that his blood pressure doesn't get up. But he just hasn't played, right? So you can't sit there and say they're going to upgrade from Spencer Rattler. That would kind of be crazy. But could we look back in a couple years and be talking about Sellers if South Carolina can build around him as a first round NFL guy? That would not surprise me at all. He is uber talented. I think there are just questions kind of around him. And then you got to remember he's going to be a first-year starter against this schedule that we just broke down. So there'll be some growing pains, but people around the program are really excited about him.
You've alluded a couple times from the South Carolina perspective. Take me through this Juice Wells thing. Obviously, Ole Miss counting on him with a pretty talented receiving core. They're looking at him and Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins and having a lot of talent out there. I know that left South Carolina under less than ideal circumstances from the South Carolina side. Sort of what was he like prior to that, player wise? What are we looking at? And then what the hell happened, Chris?
Yeah. How long do we have? To condense it, I mean, Juice came to South Carolina as a transfer from James Madison. Shane Beamer obviously has a lot of connections up in Virginia and the Richmond area. And, Juice went to high school in Virginia and then went to Fork Union for prep school and then over to James Madison. And in a couple years there, he's got his name in the record books there. And he had a really good 2022 year for South Carolina, specifically the Clemson game. He and Rattler connected, upset Clemson on the road in Death Valley that year. And so there was a lot of, I think, well-deserved, whatever hype, whatever you want to call it, attention going into the 2023 season. But he had the stress fracture, the foot injury, had the surgery, was very limited the first week or two, and then got back in the Georgia game. And remember, South Carolina's up on the road in Athens last year. Juice scores a touchdown and then kind of re-aggravates it, and that set off the rest of the year, which was, Gamecock fans have a lot of opinions on it for sure. The bottom line, I think, is that there are two sides to a story like that. I don't think it's completely cut and dry. Could Juice have, the thing that always comes up is, could Juice have played? Yes, he could have. Did he have reasons to not play to protect himself or whatever it may have been? Sure, but in the NIL era, as you guys know, if a guy's not playing, what are fans going to think about? That guy's, getting NIL money and he's not playing, right? And so that, there's been that. Him going to Ole Miss and him coming back to Williams-Brice as an Ole Miss, rebel has caused some angst among Gamecock fans as well. So the bottom line is that certainly last year South Carolina missed his presence. Xavier Legette broke out and became a first-round pick. And, did an outstanding job, but South Carolina, from a depth standpoint, just did not have enough depth at receiver, and that was part of it. So yeah, not the best parting of ways there by any means.
How good is he if he's healthy and motivated and ready to go?
Oh yeah, I mean he can be really good. You look at what he did against Tennessee, against Clemson. He's a guy that can run, who has ball skills. I remember when he got to South Carolina, this was a guy that just really had a chip on his shoulder because he, his upbringing, and then, didn't really get had to go to prep school, had to go to James Madison, stepped up to the SEC, and then proved himself at that level. I remember he told me, we interviewed him on a radio show one time, and he was saying that he was a brick mason, so he certainly was like that when he first got to South Carolina. And then, I didn't interact with him as much in 2023, and I know people have opinions on, whatever may have happened from there, but he can be really, really good. He's a very talented receiver for sure if he's healthy and he's ready to go.
You mentioned NIL a couple of times. South Carolina, in my opinion, you feel free to tell me I'm way off, and I'll certainly take your word for it. They kind of got ahead of NIL when it first came out, and a very passionate fan base, all of that stuff. How has the whole NIL thing gone when the football program perhaps hasn't gotten the results from the investment that they've made?
Yeah, that's a great question. South Carolina was one of the first. I don't know. They had maybe one of the first 10 to 15 collectives in the country, and as things progressed, I do think some others passed them. And when I say, some people may say, well, of course, Texas and schools like that are going to pass South Carolina. That's not what I mean. I think Ole Miss, Missouri, like schools that have some similarities to South Carolina, pass them. And it's hard to lay, kind of put your finger on it. I think South Carolina didn't take as much advantage after the 2022 campaign as they could have, right? Something that I heard after last year was, well, they went 5-7. Like, you can't expect, as we know, guys, it's still primarily donor led, right? And I know that's not fair and all that jazz, but it is what it is. The schools that are doing it right, Missouri's a little bit of a different model, but they've been largely donor led. They didn't really capitalize after 2022 because I understand if you're not going to do it after the 2023 year, everybody's kind of disappointed, but they beat 2 top 10 teams back to back to end that year. And you would have expected this giant windfall, and it didn't really happen. And it would take probably an entire other podcast to kind of go in depth on why that was.
Give me the.
That said, go ahead.
Cliff's notes on it, because I'm really curious. Why do you think?
Yeah, I just think I think the schools that have been best at NIL from top down have embraced it as an institution, as an athletic department. I think that was a little bit slower going at South Carolina. I think once things weren't capitalized on in that real immediate window, then you got to the 2023 season and it went sideways. You think about the first game of 2023, a lot of excitement. They go play North Carolina and Charlotte, give up 9 sacks, lose the game, right? So that kind of just kills off momentum. So I think maybe from an infrastructure standpoint, maybe from, just not capitalizing on that. And certainly at that time, there were rules about what athletics departments could and couldn't do. But I think it just generally didn't capitalize on it got Now, South Carolina's still been able to make an impact in NIL. They were able to keep Spencer Rattler, right? They got Juice Wells to come back for the 2023 season. In recruiting, they've been able to land some big-time guys like Nicholas Harbor, a 5-star from D.C., Dylan Stewart, who everybody in the country wanted out of D.C. last year, a 5-star edge. But they're only able to, I think, get to that with a limited amount of guys, if that makes sense. Like, I look at Ole Miss, y'all tell me if I'm wrong, they're left and right getting these type of guys, and we're all lying to ourselves if we don't think NIL is a big part of that. There's nothing wrong with that in 2024. It just is what it is. I think South Carolina, in some ways, me covering the program on a daily basis, I can look at it and go, if they could take NIL to the next level, if they could be more similar to what Ole Miss or Missouri's doing, not Texas, they don't need Lamborghinis on the top of the parking garage, but if they could get to that level, you can kind of see this is what they could do in recruiting. We've seen some glimpses of it, right? So that's kind of how I view it right now for them.
One of their big portal gets, I thought, was Rocket Sanders, who 2 years ago was arguably the best running back in the league. It was him and Quinshon Judkins. And then last year he was just completely unproductive due to injuries and basically shut it down. Which version of him do you expect South Carolina to see?
Well, certainly they hope it's the 2022 version where him and KJ Jefferson gave them fits in Arkansas on the road. It's hard to say. Yeah, I think they'll get the 1,400-yard version. That is tough to do, right? But can they get something? Can they get a 1,000-yard version? I think so. I mean, the kid is very talented. Last year, I think there are a lot of things going on. I mean, Arkansas obviously did not go well. He was banged up. I mean, he had off-season shoulder surgery here, but all indications are he's healthy now, a lot healthier, going to be full go for preseason, working out in the summer. So I tend to think we're going to get a pretty good version of Rocket Sanders. And look, that would be huge, guys, because, I laid out the offensive line issues, but just the run game at South Carolina, that's been kind of a thorn in their side. They had Mario Anderson last year, who was a revelation. He was a transfer from Newberry College, a small school here in South Carolina. And he had some really good games and good performances. But just from a personnel standpoint, they're a lot better this year because they've got Rocket, who's a proven SEC guy. They got a couple other transfers. They got some talented young guys in there. So I think they have a little bit more depth and more talent as well at running back, and Rocket leads that. So if he could get back to form, that would help them a ton. I think this is going to have to be a team that if they're successful on offense, they're going to have to be more run-based.
Kind of last thing, Chris, appreciate the time to today. Beamer in general, what's sort of the approval rating? Where's the fan base kind of with him at this point of his tenure?
Well, after the 2022 season had an extremely high approval rating, they lost the bowl game to Notre Dame, but even fans nowadays, they understand on bowl games. They're like, do you have half your roster? Do you have 3/4 of it? Whatever. And they did not have many. I think they had one tight end going into that game, and he got hurt in the game, but the way they finished that year, after last season, it was obviously tough. And, a lot of people wanted Beamer to, and I'm talking about when I say people, fans, they wanted him to shake up his staff more. And he did make some tweaks and some changes, dismissed a running backs coach. That was the first coach he's fired here at South Carolina. But he went more in the direction of keeping more intact than not. He shifted some responsibilities. They tweaked some things with the offseason program. I remember Wes and I sat down with Beamer in his office earlier this year. And, every coach is going to say, we did a deep dive in the offseason to see, but I really got the sense it was a good bit more in depth than even usual for Beamer, because he said he started really going through it in the middle of last year. And so they did change some things up, right? So people were understandably frustrated by last year. I think people are looking at it as a wait and see. They understand that the schedule is very difficult, but there is improvement expected. Nobody's sitting there going, all right, you got to, win 10 games or you're out. That's insane here at South Carolina in almost any year. But a level of improvement is what folks definitely want to see, which I understand. And even against this schedule, I think they've got a shot to get there, provided they can stay healthy and develop as I think they could.
Vegas has South Carolina 5.5 on a win total. Is that about where you would put it to?
The first 2 years, I think, of Beamer's tenure, he outperformed that. I think last year was the first year they slipped below what Vegas thought. Yeah, again, margin for error. It's just hard to tell. I think they could go below that. I think they could go above that. It would not be a big shock to me one way or the other. I'm not surprised that that's the level. It's hard to have a team coming off of a 5-win season against this schedule and have Vegas. I think it's a 9 wins over under. That just wouldn't make sense to me. So that makes sense. But would I be surprised if they end up outperforming that? Not at all.
Chris, as always, man, thanks so much for the time. Are you going to be in Dallas?
Nope, I will not. All
right, well, then I won't see you in Dallas, but I'll see you somewhere down the road soon, I hope.
I will be. Neal, if y'all want to make a ride over to Oklahoma or Alabama this year for the games, I will be there, and I'll be in Columbia for the Ole Miss game. So.
All right, well then I'll definitely see you in Columbia then. See you, buddy.
All right, guys, appreciate y'all having me.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Chris Clark there, GamecockCentral.com. Appreciate his time today. Yeah, I mean, look, Neal, this schedule, I mean, we went through it with him and we kind of like pit parts of it, but let's look at this thing just top to bottom for a second. This is South Carolina. 5.5 is where Vegas has them. And, South Carolina, we talk about this a lot. It's one of the teams that is historically somewhat similar to Ole Miss. You can do a lot of profile stuff that east to west. They've always kind of been the same team. Mm-hmm. But Ole Miss doesn't play them very much. We don't look at them very much. They're way the hell over there, and it just kind of is what it is. But we talk about all these difficult schedules. Considering it's a team that is sort of on the fringe of bowl eligibility and being average, above average, whatever they might be this season, this thing is raw hell. Again, they start out with Old Dominion. At Kentucky is the second game of the season, and it might be a must-win for South Carolina when you look at this schedule.
Yeah.
Old Dominion, at Kentucky, LSU at home, Akron. So you easily could be 2-2 right there before the bye week.
Yep.
Your 3 games between bye weeks, as he said, Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma with 2 on the road. So you easily could be 2-5 right there.
Yep.
Then you play A&M.
Yep.
You could be 2-6.
Yeah.
Then you get Vanderbilt. But after that, you still got Missouri and Clemson.
Yeah. No, it's very difficult.
This team could be decent and be 4-8.
Sure. Or they could pull off a couple upsets.
They could.
Difficult place to play, sometimes especially early in the season.
But if I'm Vegas, if I'm choosing this, I have a hard time going, hey, they're going to win at least 2 of those and go 6-6. Like, I go,
sure.
oh,
No,
my God.
Probably go under, but.
Because if you get, now look, I can get them to 6. Old Dominion, Akron, off the top, obviously. Wofford, off the top. Vanderbilt, that's 4.
Sure.
I mean, Kentucky and A&M, okay. Well, you know what I mean? That's again, it's a hard schedule, but those are your 2 most winnable games.
You get LSU early.
Yeah.
Maybe defensively they're still struggling. I don't know. I mean, again, I'd go under. It's why I keep coming back to the same thing when people do this with Ole Miss, right? Is the whole 10-2. 10-2 sort of if I were an Ole Miss fan, this would be the thing that would spook me a little bit. 10-2 likely means you went 5-0 in those 5 SEC games that everyone's sort of taking for granted.
Yeah.
And those games include at South Carolina, at Arkansas, at Florida. That's all included. It includes Kentucky, which was a 1-play game the last time they played in Oxford. It includes the rivalry game against State, which on paper I think might be the easiest or second easiest out of those 5. It's the interesting part of the schedule is that you've got to do some things that you don't typically do, right? And if you lose one of those 5 games, you've got to make it up against Oklahoma or LSU in all likelihood. Which is possible. I think Ole Miss is going to beat Oklahoma. But Ole Miss hasn't won in LSU since 2008.
That's correct.
And so not many people, there aren't many people that do this. But the people that sort of chalk that up as I think that's a win. I'm like, well, historically it's not.
Yeah, scratch for Ole Miss, completely chalk, is 10-2 with losses to Georgia and LSU.
Yeah.
And then you play it out.
Yeah.
But if they go, hey, there were no surprises, the season just went and was kind of boring in that nature, you go, 10-2.
Yeah. That's why the exercise of the whole football guides taking a visit and go, it's not 10-2, that's out, is interesting. I've done it with several people, and they look at you like, deer in the headlights. The football gods come down, and all they tell you is Ole Miss did not go 10-2.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I'm telling you. See ya. Peace. And then you have to figure it out.
You either go, oh, crap, or wow. Yeah. Yeah.
If they come down and go 10-2 is off the table, I'm just going to give you a tip here. I'm going to help you out.
Taking one number and throwing it out.
I'm going to give you a tip here. Let you do with it as you please. We have a crystal ball, and they did not go 10-2. Peace out. And they leave, and you're sitting there going, well, I wonder what happened. I don't know. It's really interesting. It's where you get into the whole optimism, pessimism. I think there are some landmines on that schedule that people are just sort of disregarding.
How do you rate difficulty those 5 landmines, those 5 other games? How do you kind of put them 1 to 5?
I mean,
again,
I don't know. I mean, because
we're at Carolina.
Before today, I couldn't have told you who South Carolina's quarterback was.
At Arkansas.
And as of this moment, I couldn't tell you the name of Arkansas's quarterback.
Florida, Kentucky, and Mississippi State.
I mean, I think State and Arkansas, I think State's the lowest.
You think you got State at 5?
Because it's in Oxford.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think State at home is easier than at Arkansas.
Is Kentucky 4 because of the same reason?
I just think Kentucky's got a chance to be decent.
Well, they have an identity. You always know what you're getting. They're fine.
I mean, they've got a chance to be okay. I mean, I think Kentucky's the hardest of the 5.
Do you really?
I do. Look, Kentucky's good. They didn't.
I'm just having a hard time putting the home game 1.
I mean, I get it.
That's my reasoning.
Lane's been really good at home. I don't know what to expect out of Florida. I don't know what Florida will be at that point.
Because if Florida is what we think, they're just dead on arrival is the thing. Yeah. Now, they're still Gainesville, still talented. I'm not doing that, but
I guess I'm not as ready to do that to Florida as so many others. And maybe I will be after I talk to more people who are pretty educated about it,
But to not do that, you're saying they're going to beat some of these teams, and you go, oh, God.
I mean, they have talent.
Yeah.
I mean, there's talent there. Is it enough to do it? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we do some assumptions on Ole Miss, too, that sometimes I'm like, ooh, man, Juice Wells, for example.
Mm-hmm.
There's this expectation that he's going to be this impact wide receiver.
Deion Smith.
What if he's not healthy? There's this expectation that Deion Smith is going to walk into the program at the end of July, 1st of August, and essentially be an all-SEC wide receiver. And I'm going to be honest with you, that feels like one hell of a reach. That feels like this just Stretch Armstrong reach. Now, you tell me that Trey Harris is an elite receiver. Sure. I got it. Good. Caden Priestcorn has a breakout season. I'm with you.
You know exactly what you're getting from Jordan Watkins. He's going to be very effective. He's going to catch the football.
And then you know where I'm going next with the Ole Miss thing. Yes, Quinshon Judkins was a pain in the ass. Pull up his stats. Pull up his stats from the last 2 years.
No, I know.
Because 2 years ago,
I think he
2 years ago, Rocket Sanders had an elite season at Arkansas and was probably not the best back in the league. Last season, the kid at Missouri had one hell of a season.
No, through 2 years, Judkins' numbers are basically right there with Herschel and Emmitt Smith and stuff.
So you either have to replace those numbers or you have to make up for them elsewhere. And I'm not saying they won't, but my thing is that I think there's this temptation to go, well, they'll just figure it out. Okay, well, if I'm going to do that, then I probably can do that with some other teams, right? Maybe South Carolina is better at quarterback. Maybe the kid walks in day one and he's a first-round pick. Maybe Arkansas solves some of their chemistry issues from a year ago. And who's the quarterback? The kid from Boise? I can't name him. He comes in and settles them down and makes them more efficient. I don't know. We don't know these things. You can't predict an NFL season. It's impossible to predict the college season. Look, I think if you did the exercise with me where the football gods dropped into the room and said, what do you think? I'd go, wow, they went 11-1. Before I went, holy shit, they lost a bunch of games. But if you told me, this is the part where people are like, would you be, someone asked me this yesterday, would you be shocked if Ole Miss went 9-3? And I said, no. Shocked? No. Not even a little bit.
They're going to have to succeed at running back with almost an NFL approach that you kind of value in them the same way. It's what it's got to look like.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be on the quarterback, the tight end, the passing game, all that kind of
And
stuff.
the defense.
My biggest thing with the running back position that's the question is simply health. Because Bentley hasn't been healthy and Diggs is not going to be ready at the start of the season. So you're just sort of limited in what the scope looks like. You've got Parrish, but he's never been an A1 guy.
What happens if Dart gets beat up again? Where late last season, Dart really couldn't throw the ball. And they leaned heavily into Quinshon.
And I think had Dart gotten hurt in the bowl game, Austin Simmons was going to be the quarterback. My opinion. A little sourced, but my opinion. Simmons, I don't know that he's 100%. He's got an elbow thing.
Yeah.
Been throwing.
I don't know.
But couldn't throw a baseball today. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think Ole Miss, if you made me bet, I'd bet Ole Miss is a playoff team. But if you told me if the guides came down and said they didn't make the playoffs, I think I'd be able to tell you why. And so you get into some of those games like South Carolina where it's at night in that place where it gets really loud. And maybe, look, South Carolina doesn't have to be better than you for 365 days. They got to be better than you for about 3 hours. And frankly, they have to be better than you for about an hour and a half. Get to the half, and suddenly you have some momentum and you shorten a game to a handful of series. Look no further than 2022 when Ole Miss went to Fayetteville. And they've got to go to Fayetteville again. Now, this time it's going to be in the morning, and that's going to help. But
look,
Ole Miss, let me finish my point.
Yeah.
Ole Miss was better than Arkansas 2 years ago. But in that first half, Ole Miss didn't answer the bell, and Arkansas really answered the bell and played one hell of a half. It's the part of the Kiffin story that really gets overlooked is they were really ready to play that day. What if you encounter that at Florida? What if you get Florida's best shot for a half? Then you got to answer the bell, and that's the part of it's like your mom says, and you got to play the games. She's exactly or he, she, whoever is right. You got to play the games. I mean, look. I think you can do this with Missouri. I think you can do this with Alabama. Frankly, you can do this with Georgia. Georgia's schedule's brutal. Texas has to adjust to life in a different conference. There's a lot of unknowns there for them.
Yeah, I do think Ole Miss in general has a system that works at running back. They've got guys back. They like the line, but it's at least should be improved, I guess. They have a lot of pieces.
Sure.
The pieces potentially work.
Sure.
How they manage those pieces and how you stay healthy is going to be really, 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 really interesting.
My guess is that they figure it out, and it's
sure.
fine. My point is that when you're talking about potential pitfalls, I do think it's disingenuous to just go, well, Quinshon Judkins is addition by subtraction. I think that's insane. And I keep hearing that from people, and I'm like, look, yes, on one hand, was he a pain in the ass? Absolutely. Yes. Eliminating that pain in the ass, is that nice? Yes. On the other hand, as late as the Peach Bowl, they really leaned on him. And now you don't have him to lean on. And there were some moments last season where they really leaned on him and he delivered.
Yeah, to me, it's health. It's just, can you keep two of them healthy throughout the season? Can it be any of two of the three or four or whatever? Because two of them are hurt.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of where I'm at here.
Yeah.
That's my question
as
we do this. And it's why your number's right. Because if somebody goes, hey, 11-1's off the table, you go, okay, well, that didn't tell me anything. And if they go, hey, 9-3's off the table, you go, they probably made it then. Cool.
Oh, so if the football gods told you 10-2's off the table and 9-3's off the table.
Well, I mean, even give me 10-2 as an option. If you just said 9-3's off, I'd go, they went 10-2 or 11-1.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think they're going 8-4.
I would agree. But yeah, if they come down and go 10-2's off the table, it's a pretty interesting exercise. Because 11-1 means, if you assume the Georgia loss, means they went to LSU and won, and they beat Oklahoma, and they didn't stumble once.
Mm-hmm.
No stumble.
Yeah.
No stumble. In a sport where teams stumble all the time.
No, look, to get to where you're trying to go, you're going to be on the road in one of these games in the third quarter where it's a game, and you're going to have to figure it out. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
Hell, it happened to Georgia at Missouri 2 years ago.
Happened to Georgia last year.
Yeah, they were sleepy coming in and kind of whatever, and then they figured it out. And
yeah.
You don't have to draw a picture of it. You just got to finish with one more point than they do.
And in hindsight, that night was probably the first sign that Missouri was on the cusp of figuring some things
2 years
out.
ago.
Yeah. In hindsight. I don't know why people in our field just kind of don't want to give them credit. They were really good last year. They were really good. Missouri was really good last year.
It's because they're the least sexy team in a conference that they don't feel like they fit in.
Yeah,
and you just kind of forget about them, and they're over there.
And everybody does the Kansas State thing with them. And here's another parallel. Ole Miss was in trouble against Tulane without their quarterback on the road late in that game in New Orleans last September.
Yeah.
I mean, we've forgotten that. It's like that didn't happen. It did. So when people go, well, Missouri, they had to kick a 60-yarder to beat Kansas State. See, they're a fraud. I'm like, but no, it's college football. There will be unpredictability. To your point, there was a point last year, the Auburn game, third quarter on the road at Jordan-Hare. Little, and then they handled it. They answered the bell.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was their sleepy game.
You're going to have one of those. That's coming. I don't know which one it'll be, but they're not going to be sky high 12 times or even 8 times. It doesn't work like that. You're going to at some point maybe it's Parrish, maybe it's Bentley, maybe it's the other kid. I'm having a hard time. There's so much roster churn that I'll be out there the first few days studying a thing. But I mean, you do have to replace Judkins' productivity.
And it's potentially a gift that Diggs is coming back middle of the season.
Sure.
You get fresh legs when everybody else is starting to kind of go a little bit, and you get a guy who's really, really good as far as a pass statistical standpoint.
And Ole Miss's defense made a big jump last year. Maybe they make another big jump, and then you don't have to have as much offense.
You're way better on defensive line on paper. You were a year ago.
Yes.
I mean, they
much better.
They fixed it as much as you can.
Theoretically, yeah.
I think they're set up for T.J. Dudley to have a really big year. He's kind of the guy I have circled. I think he's about to be really, really, really good.
Thing. Got some concerns at corner with depth.
To the point that I think they got to figure out what to do with Perkins.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
But, look, again, this is the part that it's actually one of the reasons I sort of look forward to media days a little bit is that there's so much roster churn now that you actually do learn some things at media days when you talk to people that cover individual teams.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, can you imagine being the guy that covers the whole league right now with every roster having 40 new faces? I mean, it's impossible. It's impossible. You can take some stabs at what you think teams will look like, but you don't really know. I don't know what LSU's going to look like. I mean, I really don't. I mean, if you tell me LSU's a really good team, I buy it. If you tell me LSU's a 6-6 team, I buy it. I don't know. There's a lot of new faces down there. Beats me.
It's a good exercise. It's good. That Kentucky-Carolina game early is interesting just from the standpoint of which one's in a weird spot when Ole Miss gets them.
Sure.
Because for both those teams, that's kind of a win if you're going to do anything.
Yeah. So you take a scenario where South Carolina wins that game, right? They start having some confidence and start playing a little better. Next thing you know, they're scary as hell.
Well, because there's also look. Do I think they're doing it? No, I don't. There's a world where they're 4-0. They could beat LSU the third week of the season at home.
Well, sure. If they can go to Kentucky and win, yeah, they could beat LSU at home.
Yeah. Now, I think they're 2-2, but
I 10-2 also. At which point that means Kentucky won that game.
But even at 3-1, that's a bye week before Ole Miss where they're going, hey, let's try to get one of these next 3.
Sure.
Just survive, and then we can kind of make this happen a little bit.
Sure. And that's the one they'd point to because it's the home one.
It's the home one and the first one. Again, it's a flex game. It will start at anywhere from 2:30 to 7 o'clock Central Time. Carolina and Ole Miss.
Yeah, I know what I'm cheering for.
7, of course. Night game. Woo!
Getting out of there traffic-wise is a pain in the ass.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind a day game where there was still some daylight left.
Did you see Les Miles is suing LSU?
I saw that.
See that? Because he's worried about the College Football Hall of Fame is the reason for this.
I mean, I get it.
I'm okay.
I get it.
Miles, who coached LSU from 2005 to 2016, Also named the NCAA and the National Football Foundation, which manages the College Football Hall of Fame, as defendants. The lawsuit states he was deprived of property rights of the vacated wins in his nomination for the Hall of Fame, which must be done by those affiliated with the NCAA member school. LSU vacated 37 wins because of recruiting violations stemming from impermissible benefits, and the father of former player Vidal Alexander, blah, blah, blah. You already know the deal here. He went 37-14 during the stretch. The wins were announced, blah, blah, blah. That dropped Miles' overall record from 145-73, a winning percentage of 66%, to 108-73, a winning percentage of 597. Coaches must have a career winning percentage of 600 in at least 100 games to qualify for the College Football Hall of Fame.
I mean, I said this on McCready and Siskey yesterday. He ought to at least get some of his SEC wins back. Everybody else was cheating too.
Hey.
I mean, keeping it real.
No harm, no foul. It's good here. It's fine. Go ahead.
It's the one thing I do like about the whole, quote, NIL era, end quote, is that we no longer have to do the they cheated thing. Now we get to say out loud that everybody, quote, cheats, end quote. Other people just are better at it.
Am I weird that I think he should? I'm like, look, I don't think there should be a single dollar exchanged. But do I feel like he should be allowed to be in the Hall of Fame? Yes. Like, I feel like his actual suit has merit here.
I do too.
Like, I kind of look at it and go, okay.
I mean, it shows you that matters to him and matters to people around him.
And I get that. I have no problem with that mattering. I'm not going to make fun of somebody for that mattering.
No. It's I can't really relate to it on any personal level, but I get it. He's driven by that.
I mean, as Mark says, Mike Leach is another one that the internet talks about all the time because I think his winning percentage is 596.
Yeah.
Literally like one game or something.
And look at the places he coached.
Yeah.
He didn't go coach
Not all things are equal.
Texas, Oklahoma, and LSU. He coached at Washington State, Texas Tech, Mississippi State.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
And for what he did profit, like Mike Leach is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, it's not even. I don't like the 60% requirement. It takes away the ability to have common sense. Yes.
Common sense.
Common sense, yes. It does.
I mean, no, Leach should be in the Hall of Fame. Absolutely. He revolutionized the game.
I mean, he did.
He did change the game completely. And not only that, was fun. For a sport that likes to talk about how much fun it is, he was fun. Legitimately fun. In many ways, Les Miles was too.
Mm-hmm.
Les Miles was good for the sport. He was a character. I've sat in an office with him, just me and him. He is that guy.
See, Rory made a statement yesterday.
I heard that he made a statement. I did not see it.
It shocked me. Okay, a couple things. I'll read the statement. One, it shocked me in the statement he didn't apologize for not doing media. I kind of thought he would. Like, that felt.
Should have.
I'm not. Yeah, like, whatever. However, criticizing him for not hanging around to go shake Bryson's hand, that's not a golf thing. Stop. Ricky Fowler made a mockery of that over the years, and sure, Bryson shook Xander's hand at the PGA, but that is not anything at all to accuse Rory McIlroy of negatively. That does not matter.
Here's my McIlroy beef on a sport that I don't follow, so you can tell me I'm wrong.
Okay.
But I'm going to guess, based on how popular golf is, that there are a handful of journalists, broadcast, print, whatever.
Yeah, sure.
Who are consistent beat writers. They're on the tour.
Oh, yeah.
And they have written a lot of positive, glowing things about McIlroy in the past that likely has led to an increase in his popularity and therefore an increase in his market value.
Frankly, have humanized him in very positive ways for 15 years.
Right?
Yeah, sure.
So on Sunday, there were two stories for media, only two.
Yeah, sure.
One was Bryson DeChambeau winning the U.S. Open.
Yeah.
And the other was Rory losing it.
Yeah.
And does that suck for Rory? Of course. A lot. Sucks big. But I think he had an obligation to that same media who are kind of working on deadline to be available, even if it was just for a few minutes. Hey, fellas.
I'm really struggling here. I'm trying.
Can we keep this short? But I'll answer your questions because those people are professionals and they've been good to him. And in a moment where he had to return the favor, he didn't do it. It was the back scratching thing.
It's the face of the PGA Tour.
He's the guy that numerous times said, "Hey, my back itches," and the media just said, "Hey, we'll take off your shirt. We'll scratch and scratch and scratch."
Yeah.
And in this case, the media went, "Hey, I've got this one spot right back here I can't quite get to. I'm not even going to take my shirt off. You don't even have to use your fingernails. Will you take this fork and just work it for me?" And he went, "No, I'm good." And that, to me, that's the part that sort of sucks. And I thought it reflected on him in a moment of, I get it, the moment sucked.
I think he was having literally a mental breakdown in a way. But
then say that.
Yeah. I honestly think he was having a bit of a crisis. As much as you can in a golf, you know what I mean? I mean, he still was going to go on his private jet and go back to West Palm. He's all right. But
Kyrie Irving took the podium last night.
His statement, he puts this out on social media yesterday. Yesterday was a tough day, probably the toughest I've had in my nearly 17 years as a professional golfer. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Bryson. He's a worthy champion and exactly what professional golf needs right now. I think we can all agree on that. As I reflect on my week, I'll rue a few things over the course of the tournament, mostly the 2 missed putts on 16 and 18 in the final day. But as I always try to do, I'll look at the positives of the week that far outweigh the negatives. As I said at the start of the tournament, I feel closer to winning my next major championship than I ever have. The one word I will describe my career is resilient. I've shown my resilience over and over again over the last 17 years, and I will again. I'm going to take a few weeks away from the game to process everything and build myself back up for the defense of the Genesis Scottish Open and the Open Championship at Royal Troon. See you in Scotland. He could have done more there.
Should have done more there. It's weak. It's weak.
You actually weren't resilient because you didn't just
and you're cutting
fulfill your obligations.
You're cutting yourself off from that same media until you get there, and then you're going to bitch when they ask you about it when you get there, and they're going to because they have to. What happened? You don't miss those putts, and then you miss 2 in 20 minutes?
The one on 16 was strictly not like that. That can't happen. 18, he hit a bad pitch that left him above the hole, and he should have made it. But from a golf standpoint, those weren't the same putts per se.
Look, I've sunk the pirate hole many times when I needed to 2-putt it. I've done it.
Yeah.
I mean, had I not made it, I would have potentially lost to one of the girls. That was big pressure. No, I mean, I'm not making fun of the guy.
No,
people, it's hard. Winning championships is hard. We say that all the time. We'll say it this fall a number of times.
Because Bryson missed one from 3 feet, essentially.
Yeah, winning championships is hard, and
you get a little nervy when
pressure bursts pipes.
Yeah. You give him that same putt tomorrow and a little hit and giggle, and he'll make it every time and not even have to look at it.
Sure. I mean, put an NBA guy on the free throw line in a practice gym with nobody around, and that cat's just draining it. Now, put 19,000 people in the stands, millions watching on television, and call it Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and it's a little different deal. So I get it, but he owed it to the media to talk about it, and he didn't do it, and it's failure on his part. It's something that I think will haunt him.
The image of the way it looked like he left was a really bad image.
Yeah. Go do your press conference. Show them you're human.
Yeah, and you can set off top, hey, look.
Guys, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I don't know how long I can sit up here. And most of those guys would have been like, okay, cool.
Oh, yeah.
What happened?
Yeah.
I just need a quote. I've said it many times. It's the reason I have so much respect for Bo Wallace. There were some times when he got thrown under the bus, mistreated, different things. And he always, every single time, showed up.
He did.
You can't show up when you win if you won't show up when you lose.
Yeah, it's just part of the gig.
It's a big part of the gig, especially when, like you said, you're the face of the PGA Tour.
I mean, you're the number 2 player in the world, and you're
got to show. It's revelatory. It is. Sucks, but it is. It's revelatory.
18th title for the Boston Celtics last night, drilling Dallas in the almost by 20, 18, something like that.
It was a blowout.
106-80 something.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
You know, there's this narrative that everybody's going, it was boring. I disagree completely. I think in so many ways, I'm not a Celtics fan.
It was uninteresting to the average fan.
Sure.
Because we don't know any dynamics.
But, you know, as someone who follows the league, I thought last night was kind of fun to watch. And I'm not a Celtics fan. I don't cheer for them.
Because it's deserved.
They earned it.
Yeah.
They paid their dues. The emotion that you saw from Jason Tatum late in the fourth quarter was legit.
Mm-hmm.
Shows you, I mean, hey, he took the heat.
Mm-hmm.
They lost to finals. They lost in the Eastern Conference Finals twice. There's all sorts of talk year after year about he and Jaylen Brown, that duo should be broken up. You should trade Brown. That was always the narrative around the Celtics. They should trade Brown, start over, do something different. They did the Gordon Hayward, Kyrie Irving thing that failed. And they just stuck with it, and it paid off last night. They won a title. Basically, wire to wire. They were considered the best team before the season. They won the most games, and they cruised through the playoffs and won a championship.
Missoula has 121 regular season wins in 2 seasons. Do the math there.
That's and no one
over
gives
60
him,
each.
No one gives him credit because he doesn't play some of the silly media games. Now, he answers their questions, but he doesn't sometimes steer into the narratives.
They won over 80 games. Only 13 other teams have won 80 combined games in a season, and not all those have finished with titles. Golden State, the most obvious one from their loss. Boston, which now has the most championships in NBA history at 18, has hit 80 wins just 2 other times. History will get better to this team as time goes on when you just simply look back at the stats and go, holy hell. They're hurt by a couple things. They're hurt they didn't get what was perceived to be the Western power in the finals.
Denver.
You beat a Dallas team instead of Denver
Sure.
or whatever.
Sure.
Frankly, even a little bit hurt that OKC was the 1 seed because they were seen as still up and coming and not the team that you were dealing with. You didn't slay a dragon. And even in the East, it kind of went a little weird. You get the Pacers, and it's like, okay.
But, I mean, you got the team that...
Yeah, I get it, but...
I get it.
That's how that happened, though.
I think that's... I know you're not saying that. I think that's
because had you gone through Bucks and then Nuggets and Sixers and, like, boom, 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 and...
Well, the East was not as good as the West from a depth standpoint, but they were the best team in the league. They were the best team. They were the best team in the league all year. It showed. They were really good. And for teams like Oklahoma City,
it was.
If I'm Sam Presti last night, I'm like, see, that's why we're not doing anything.
Yeah.
We're not doing this big. We're not doing Durant. We're not doing the big marketing and trade. No, we're going to stick with what we've got. We're going to let these guys grow together. There are going to be some learning pains, but at some point, you've got this trio of guys that if they stay together and stay healthy, they're going to win a title.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to improve. Jaylen Brown got better. He was Finals MVP. Tatum was proved that he's a top 10 player in the game. And now we'll do the thing about this is failure on the Mavericks' part. Somebody had to lose.
Oh, they had a good year. Well,
they had a good year, and they have a nice nucleus back. And
they do have to get better.
I think they get out-coached sometimes in these series.
Really?
Yeah. Dallas is the part that if you're a Mavericks person, the part that you have to be honest with yourself and say is you were it was a foul, but it was close. You were a foul away from having to go play at Oklahoma City in Game 7 and perhaps not getting out of the second round. And you go, boy, our margin for error remains really, really small.
How have the numbers been so far? Because I do think you have to get close games to get good numbers.
Terrible.
And everything's a blowout.
The ratings are awful.
Yeah.
And if you're the NBA, I don't. It's the juxtaposition of the ratings suck. No one's outside of the talking heads on ESPN. No one's really talking about you, and yet you're about to get this massive TV deal.
Why?
I don't know.
If you're TV, why?
I was listening to a podcast. It was. It may have been Le Batard, but it was a business-related sports business, and they had a MLB guy and an NBA guy, I think, on, and they were talking about the networks. The network people that decide contracts and stuff, they don't even pay attention to the ratings.
Oh, really?
They don't really care. They care about the inventory.
You got to put something on.
And it's live television. That the ratings to them don't really matter. That you can justify ratings. And they were kind of talking about how baseball doesn't get great ratings yet. It gets great return on investment. I'm not smart enough, and I'm not in that field enough to know how all that works.
Okay. I know you're a noted hockey fan. Florida going to finish it off tonight in Miami?
I mean, I would assume it's going to be similar to what we saw last night.
7 o'clock, ABC, ESPN Plus tonight for the Oilers and the Panthers.
Dallas didn't have a lot of juice last night. I'm going to guess Edmonton doesn't have a lot of juice either.
Mm-hmm. Florida eliminated North Carolina State at the College World Series yesterday. So now Florida turns around and plays Kentucky.
Okay, I'm not.
Hold on, what?
I got one thing on that.
On what?
NC State, Florida.
Okay, what?
That's if I'm NC State's coach, I do not sleep well for a few days because I did that. You get him out one time.
Yeah.
You're like, maybe walk him.
He's talking about Jack Caglian.
He's the reason they lost. He hit a 3-run bomb. He can't hit a 3-run bomb walking to first. Can't. It's not possible.
This might be the tenor of Neal's season overall. If he has one thesis, it is why the hell are you pitching to Jack and Condon?
Yeah, why? Well, why'd you pitch to him? He hit a 3-run homer. He can't hit a 3-run homer if he walks.
Well, he's been struggling with the slider a little bit. So if you get it in,
it's a college pitcher. What if he misses?
Yeah, and he did.
Yeah, he missed. He's a college pitcher. College pitchers miss spots all the time.
And Jack didn't miss.
You don't have to. You can give me one inning of any college game, and I will find you a pitcher that misses a spot. Any game. Pick a game. I don't care. Promise you I'll find a pitcher misses a spot at least once in an inning. In every single college game that's ever played all year. So you can't do that. Well, our pitcher's going to execute all of his pitches. What if he doesn't? Walk him. Get the next guy. You weren't winning the title anyway, but you'd still be there. Playing, I guess, today or tomorrow.
Play Kentucky tomorrow.
Kentucky lost last night?
A&M beat Kentucky last night.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's today. I don't know.
Whatever.
Yeah.
You'd still be there.
Yeah. The schedule gets weird now.
Probably weren't going to win, but
Tennessee and Texas A&M are both 2-0. They are sitting there waiting. Tennessee is waiting on the winner of Florida State and North Carolina, who play today. And then Kentucky and Florida play to get back to A&M.
So the SEC
has will have 3 of the final 4 and are guaranteed a team in the finals and could have 2 teams in the finals.
I'm hoping it's 2 teams in the finals just to piss off the national media.
Well, I mean, a Texas A&M Tennessee final, my head gets into a bit of a screwball on what we're doing here and who we're just going to sit there and watch and pull for.
I think in that point you do have to tip your hat to 2 programs that have completely figured it out.
Texas A&M is interesting because they keep getting hurt. And now, if you told me a team came back through, I think it's on that side.
Yeah.
Because Lavalette got hurt last night too. Looked like he pulled a hamstring or something.
Wow.
So if you're down him and Montgomery, that gets pretty damn shaky. You threw Prager last night. I don't know. But they're good.
This potential loss of Schlossnagle to Texas gets worse and worse by the day.
Might want to win a title because he can't leave and go to Texas if he wins a title. You might be playing for. If you're Texas, I can have Tony V or Schloss. Who you want?
I wish I knew the dynamics of the politics better. I think I'd rather have Vitello because he's younger, but Schlossnagle's really, really good.
They're 2 of the top 4 coaches in the country.
Certainly.
And maybe 1 and 2. There's an argument.
Oh, it's a fair argument.
Yeah. You might have to talk me out of the argument.
Austin, thanks for the super chat earlier. He says, I hear the ACC FSU suit is nearing its end. What does the ACC look like in 2 years from now? And do schools like Memphis and Tulane do what SMU did? There's a lot there. Look, Chase might disagree with this. I think there's a reason that the SEC hasn't put a whole lot of energy into explaining what future schedules will look like.
Yeah.
I think that's intentional. I could be completely wrong. This is not even a sourced, educated guess. I just kind of have followed this for a while. And I think the reason that they're like, whatever, we'll just run the next one back is because they think that this league's going to look a lot different in 2 years.
Oh, I think there was a hand-raised guy that got his way in a room, and they went, hey, we don't really know what's going on. Just say we're going to reverse the schedule next year and put that out, and we'll deal with it later.
Yeah.
Because in 2020, we showed you we can put one of these together in like 6 days.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter.
Completely agree.
And we'll deal with it. It's cool.
This year it was because the TV people, and they didn't really know. And it's like, well, we're not going to give it to you. You're going to have to pay for it. And then what do we do about next year? I don't know. We'll just.
That's next year.
Just do the same thing.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Just if you played LSU at home this year, you play them on the road next year. Figure it out.
Grind asked where was Mike ranked in terms of top baseball coaches after he won the title. That was his pinnacle to the point of where he would have been ranked. He's a top 10 coach at that point. Because look, no matter what happens to Mike's tenure and what has happened these last 2 years, his ability to be consistent despite the 11.7 being what it was compared to his contemporaries for years is very notable and makes him a very highly respected coach in the college game. You can be emotional or pissed off, but that doesn't change that is true. And at the end of 22, top 10 coach for sure.
Yeah.
Now the ability to adapt, I don't know.
That's the question mark.
Yeah, I don't know. They're in on. It looks like they're in on Colin Reuter, a catcher from Olive Branch that was at BYU. He was honorable mention All Big 12 this past year for the Cougars. He went to Mag Heights. He's local to Mississippi. And then to some degree kicking the tires on Brady Neal, the LSU catcher, who's now in the portal as well. I assume that someone will pay the absolute hell out of him here in the next 10 days.
I would think so.
That is my guess. So that's kind of where that is sitting currently. I don't know. I think I would take Vitello, just age-wise. Give me the younger guy.
I think so too.
But
if Schlossnagle was my consolation
you're
prize,
not upset. You'll hand him the keys and get out of the way.
Well, again, both guys have shown the ability to adapt.
They have.
And they're, at programs that have poured a lot of resources into it. Tennessee is doing everything it can to close the gap and keep him. I think Tennessee knows that whether it's this year or next year or whatever, people are going to keep coming after him. Maybe they lock him up. Maybe he stays. Who knows?
And you want Kentucky to beat Florida.
If you're Tennessee?
No, you.
Oh. Yeah, I think so. But I don't care.
I do hate that A&M is hurt. I would love a full-strength Tennessee A&M final.
Sure. That'd be fun.
It feels a little bit like they're going to be the wounded animal that Tennessee's about to slaughter.
Those, over the course of the season, were the two best teams consistently.
They were. Yeah. I kind of hate that we're potentially setting up for Tennessee to have a route through them at the end.
All I know about Kentucky and Florida is if I'm Nick Minjone, he's not seeing a pitch.
4. I'm not even going to, throw it out there. No, 4.
Go. Walk. And tip my hat. If he looks into the dugout like, what the hell's wrong with you? It's like, no, you're I don't know that we can get you out. I'm going to get the next guy.
Yeah. Enjoy the big leagues next year.
Yeah. Have fun. Glad you're leaving.
Yeah. So
I mean, seriously, I'm not losing like that.
Yeah, I get it.
If the next guy comes up and hits one to West Des Moines, okay. Good for you. Mm-hmm. You got me.
Yeah. Here, check real quick just that schedule for anyone, because I hate not having an answer.
And on the ACC thing, while you're looking that up, I mean, the ACC thing really comes down to this. Where does North Carolina want to go?
Yes.
That's really they hold the cards.
They do. They're the number 1 seed as we move this.
Everybody wants them. Do they want to go Big Ten or do they want to go SEC? And I think, based on what I've heard, they're torn.
I get that.
Academically, institutionally, they want to go Big Ten.
Athletically, they want to go SEC.
Athletically, there are people that look around, like we talked about, and go, God, if it's like this for baseball, what would it? And the answer is it would be rabid. North Carolina football would.
And there will be a
really
big booster push to make it SEC because of baseball, because they really care. And they go, are we just sacrificing the sport, guys? When it's even anyway?
Yeah.
We're getting paid either way. Are we going to take our spring culture out?
But if you're
by doing this,
if you're North Carolina from a football standpoint, you would have natural rivalries with Tennessee, South Carolina, Florida to some degree, very similar institutions.
Yeah.
Then you'd get the trips from LSU, from Alabama,
you'd figure
Texas.
it out.
I mean, you know,
it'd be all right.
I think what you would see is the SEC probably do some negotiate. Hey, we'll make you in Texas a permanent opponent. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Throw you a bone. And maybe the Big Ten does too, but both leagues are really good in basketball. From a basketball fit, I still think the SEC is a better fit for them from a basketball standpoint.
I do too. I think it sets up more matchups that make more sense.
North Carolina, Kentucky, that's game of the week stuff.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah. I agree with you. Both those games are today. So winners, no winner plays today. Florida State, North Carolina at 1:00 on ESPN today. And then Kentucky, Florida at 6:00 tonight. So 1 and 6, FSU, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Florida. Interesting day. Florida now up to 35 and 29 overall as they continue to raise it up a little bit.
Yeah, they were always good. Yeah. Just the league's hard.
Yeah. Thanks to Chris Clark for his time today. As always, we'll continue those throughout the summer, leading into camp starting in just over a month. I mean, getting this thing going and whatnot. So I appreciate Chris. Thanks to all you guys, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.